STS, episode 56. SAF your prison lawyer, the smoothest podcast host of podcast history. You don't believe me? Get your ass off the couch, go ask your mom. She'll tell you SAF is the smoothest. This episode 56, I got Paul Schnell. He's the Commissioner of Corrections, Minnesota DOC. I'm gonna put him in a white chair and grill him up, y'all. See what he gotta say. You know what I'm saying? This is a motherfucking ex-offender talking to the commissioner. Never thought that was gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? No holds barred. Check us out. Subscribe. Appreciate all the individuals hitting me up in the box. Keep hitting me up. Keep the comments coming. Appreciate you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Paul Schnell, and I'm the Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Corrections.
Welcome. Finally on the show. What are you here for?
Because I got something to say.
Your right platform. I'm going to open it up to you. Let us know what you got to say, Mr. Commissioner.
Well, I first of all, I just want to appreciate the opportunity to come and have this conversation. I think it's great.
Thank you, sir.
This is it's a big time. I think when, there was a point in time at which when I got appointed to this role 4 years ago, in January of 2019, this was a blank canvas and there was a lot of changes needed. I didn't come directly out of corrections at that time. I had been working as a police chief for almost 10 years prior to that in different jurisdictions. And so, coming into the Department of Corrections, even though when I first got out of college some 30 years ago, I started out in corrections and worked in corrections for about 9 years and then, made a transition into law enforcement and then came back. And it's a really interesting perspective when you spend as much, almost 30 years, 27, 28 years in policing. And one of the elements of that, obviously, there's an element of accountability, enforcement of the law. And now I come into the Department of Corrections and I see the back end of the system in a very different way. And so having that opportunity and looking at the things that really needed attention was one of the greatest opportunities, I think. And having the perspective of being in the community and on the law enforcement side, seeing some of the issues around policing that have been quite challenging and ugly, and historical structural racism and all those sorts of things, and then to see the back end of the system, and really that's where you really get that clear sense of who's impacted by the criminal justice system, and then it prompts you to think about what is the objective then of corrections, the back end of the system. And obviously it's implied in the name that we should be about correction, rehabilitation. The role of the courts is to impose a punishment, to impose a sentence. The role of corrections is really to try to take whatever time that person is going to spend with a PO or in a correctional facility and make the most of it. And the truth is that when I got there, talking with staff, talking with incarcerated folks, it became clear that we were not making the most of it.
Okay. So you said a lot. Let's back up. What county were you a chief in?
So I was, first of all, I was a longtime St. Paul police officer.
Okay.
Then I became the chief in Hastings. Left there, was there for about just over 3 years. Went to Maplewood for 5 years.
Okay.
And then went to Inver Grove Heights, and I was the chief in Inver Grove Heights until I got appointed in 2019.
Okay, so you never had the direction that you were going to be Commissioner of Corrections. You just knew you were going to be in law enforcement.
I started in corrections, early.
Yeah.
And then did law enforcement, and then, found myself here. And then, Governor Walz somebody had suggested to the transition team with Governor Walz, have you ever thought about talking to Paul Schnell about corrections? And they contacted me. One of the people on their team said, "Hey, would you ever be interested in thinking about serving as Commissioner of Corrections, or putting your name in the mix?" And I thought, why not? and here I am, and it's been one of the most challenging jobs I've ever had.
I understand that holistically. Are you a social? Because I mentioned.
Yeah.
Now, is that your education? That's your BA. So you didn't come out with a criminal justice.
Nope.
Okay, that's really intrigued me about you, because you're more intellectual than most individuals I run into, especially commissioners, because usually they rank and file. So they've been doing corrections all their life. They have this view, but you have this holistic view of the system, and I think you have a better grasp of it.
Well, thanks. I mean, I try, and one of the things I will say is that almost daily I get reminded of the areas that I don't have a great grasp,
Mm-hmm.
and the areas that I'm learning that we're not hitting the mark, and I think coming out of a social work background, right, having that educational background shifted in some ways my worldview. Even as a cop,
Mm-hmm.
I saw that role of social worker as really being core and fundamental to my role.
Right.
The enforcement side was really the last, was not really what it was about for me.
Right. Now, as you moved into those roles, you said that specifically about corrections, there's some places that you're missing the mark. Do you feel comfortable talking about those?
Absolutely. I mean, I look, we have to look at who we're failing, right? And when we look at things like, first of all, who's coming into our system, and we know that there's profoundly disparate impact.
Yeah.
And then we look at things like, the people who have faced challenges, and as they are in that system, we have to be more responsive to meeting the needs of people in the system. And I think we have not really turned the mirror, looked at that mirror and said, what is it that we're doing that is driving some of the outcomes or furthering some of the injustices that people are experiencing? And I think that's one of the hardest parts, is to really have the system turn its view to itself.
Right.
And that's slow. That's culture, right?
Correct.
And
Very much.
and that's been the hardest part. And so we need to, do we embrace the belief that people can change, and that we have to ask that question of ourselves, because if we don't believe that, we shouldn't be in this business.
Right. And that draws me, because I had Jonathan McCullen on, mentioned your name to him, and he's like, well, I know Paul Schnell's been over into Scandinavian countries, looking at different reform systems, checking out prisons, and I said, oh, that's great. But then I thought about it. I really critically thought about it, and I'm asking myself, how do you bring that over here without having the backlash of the culture pushing you back?
Right. I mean, look, and I think, when we think about culture, and I think this is a really important conversation. I'm glad you asked that, because while the prison system and the people who work in it need to change, there's no doubt about that, and look at themselves and change that system to really be thinking about, how do we help folks who come into the system become better neighbors? That's the kind of European model, right?
Definitely.
But I think we have to, as a society, and I don't care who you are, begin to look at the whole notion, the paradigms we have around punishment, right? Because you ask people a question, what keeps you, what kept you on the straight and narrow, right? You ask people that question, and folks will oftentimes say, I was afraid of the punishment. I never wanted to be in jail, or I never wanted to be, have that. And when you then start to look at the research says that, in fact, that deterrence is really not what kept us on the straight and narrow.
Right.
That, in fact, it was the strength of our relationships, our connections,
Definitely,
that really kept us on a path. And so that's the whole notion of the European model is let's create stronger connections, better neighbors, and we're going to have better outcomes. And but we don't have a system that's structured that way at all.
Correct.
And so, how do we embrace, one of the things that I know we're going to be talking about a little bit today is this whole model that we're trying to implement. And look, it's a criminal justice reform measure, true, but it's a cultural change mechanism as well. Definitely. And that, to me, is really going to be a key part of this change process.
Okay. Just a sidebar, because I was thinking about this, and I was like, I got to ask him, do you have anybody incarcerated related to you?
Have I in the past?
Yes.
In my family, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So incarceration is not something that's, because I talked to a lot of people who haven't had any dealings with the law. They don't know anything about corrections. So prior to you taking a job in corrections, your first job, what was your opinion of it?
Well, I mean, I've said this, I think as human beings, it's oftentimes out of sight, out of mind.
Definitely.
And so, and prisons are, in fact, places that are really set up to have people be out of sight, out of mind. Correct. In a sad sort of way. Right? Yeah. Massive fences with razor wire tops, big brick granite walls around the outside in many cases. That is the fundamental essence of how we separate people and how these folks get out of sight, out of mind. And yet we don't think about, and I think for me included, we don't often think, hey, these folks are coming out. They're gonna be out here. And then when we look at what happens to them while they're in, that's the place where I think it causes, me to swallow hard, because I think we need to be thinking about what is it that we're doing and to them, and how do we start to think more about working with them? Yes. And that's really where it's at.
Well, when I did a stint in prison, I did 8.5, and I end up I'm off parole, and I don't have any same similars. I caught my case really late in my life, so I was a little bit more stable when I went in. So as I sat in prison, instead of me just doing all the foolishness, I spent a lot of time in the law library. One of the things I had an issue with, like with any measure I see, I look at the 13th, 14th Amendment being the biggest obstruction you have with trying to make an individual who now is turned into an animal or slave into a human being. And I think with that still being like the elephant in the room, how do we get to where you're going without having that be the standard? Like, why should we treat them any different than we've been treating them when there's no reason? They're still based on
subhuman.
Exactly what what it makes it be. It makes it everything's acceptable at that particular time. So have you thought a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we think about, how do we this whole thing around, so we're the whole focus, one of the things that when I got to the Department of Corrections that was amazing to me was, you walk into the intake area, right? And everybody comes in the same way, processed in. They talk to somebody for mental health, a medical person. They talk to education. There's different people, and what's happened. What's became so clear was that this is all the bits and pieces of us, right? Yeah, it was never the whole. Right. Nobody's ever said, what is this? What does this mean? What is this person? Who are they? And what are their interests? What are their strengths? What really kind of lights their fire a little bit? And that became clear that if we didn't start by doing something different there, that when you come through that door, there's always going to be this hard balance between there's a real element of a security thing that you have to be mindful of. but it doesn't mean that you have to treat people in a way that you are less than.
Right. True.
And I think that's the message that we wanted to do. So we started having these conversations back in late 2019 about this person-centered approach. And I'll tell you that this came really out of being aware of if ever people, if you have a family or yourself, ever been to Mayo Clinic for any type of medical treatment. And I haven't, but I've had family members who have. And the way they handle you there is so different than anywhere. You come there, there's a multidisciplinary team, right? There's a social worker, there may be a spiritual care person, there's rehab people, there's your surgeon, there's your cancer specialist, whatever it is. They're all there as a team. And you're the patient, you're in the center, and they talk about all of the elements of healing and recovery and what the medical procedures you may need. And why is it why is that spiritual care person and why is that social worker there? Because you are more than just that single medical problem.
Correct, yes.
And so what we said was, how do we create a recognition of the fact that, we want to look at what are your medical needs, maybe what are your mental health needs, what are your employment or vocational interests, what are your, do you have substance use disorder issues, whatever that may be. And then we're going to learn that from you and then have a conversation with you and a team saying, what is it that you think we want to build in strength first, right? Build on strength. What is it that you think would be that thing that if you could use this time in the most effective way, what would you like to walk out of here with? And that may be that vocational certificate. That may be, I need to get I've been getting jammed up because of my use. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, we need to be on top of that.
Yeah.
And so being person-centered and looking at the whole person, not the pieces of what makes us human beings, but the whole person and what it is that they value and their interest. Taking this whole motivational kind of approach to say, we want to start with you, because if the way the system had always operated, we tell you what you need and how much of it.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is, for all of us, the truth of the matter is I have things in my life that I could do some changing around.
Right.
And I sometimes don't always like to look at those areas. And so part of our role is to say, hold that mirror up to that person and say, what about? But it really has to start from that place of trust first, that we want to hear what you think. Mm-hmm. And then through a relationship, the people who have been most influential on me in my life, and probably all of us, are those people that we had a connection with, that we trusted enough that they could say something to us and it meant something.
Right.
That's what we have to create.
It seems like that social contract that we all know about.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? That's what you're preaching on.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, when I was talking to John Choi about the whole situation, I was explaining to him, it's like almost as if, those who've been in corrections come out wanting to be the best citizen they possibly can because they've been disenfranchised so much. 100%. So they understand what it means to them. Citizenship, so all that makes sense. Exactly. My question to you is, what about the individuals who say, I'm not paying, they're still stuck in that, because we've been fed that punishment deterrent model for so long
100%.
and been told it's working. To most part, like you say, most people aren't really following corrections to this point to be like, my tax dollars are being spent this way. How do you convince the average citizen that you're gonna by investing in this community member, which means these individuals are coming back into the community? Why should we be concerned with that? Just keep them locked up.
Right. Well, here's the thing, and I think what you just asked is the fact that we don't tell the right stories. right? I mean, you're one of them.
Yes. Yes.
This is the problem, right?
Yeah, that's
there are human. We're human beings, and human beings are going to fail.
Definitely.
And myself included, right? I certainly have had failures in my life and things that I wish I had done differently and could have done better. And yet those things can't and shouldn't define me. Similarly here. And so we really need to be in a place where we're telling the stories, and the stories are more often grounded in connection than they are in what happened, locking somebody up. It is not locking somebody up. That has been the impetus for change.
right.
It has been that sense of, identity. Like we talk about identity as, how do we help people see themselves in the best possible light?
Right.
And that's by lifting up their strength. And so I think what we have to do is tell stories of people's success, who've had them, and we have to really help people. I'm talking about people, the community, society as a whole, to turn that mirror around,
Right.
and say, look, all of us have challenges, and all of us have had failures. For some of us, it ended up meaning you ended up sitting in a prison.
Yeah.
For some of us, it did by luck or whatever it may have been. And so I think what we have to do is help people really take a look at themselves and put this into context. Because if we don't, it's always the other. The people who are in the system are other.
Exactly. Us versus them.
And we that's not the reality. Last Friday night, I went and met with, there's a group of lifers. People,
I'm familiar with that.
And they once a month on Friday evening, they all meet, pizza, and then just kind of a quick check. And so I went over a couple times a year. I like to go over and just meet with them. And I said to them Friday night, looking across that room and the diversity in that room, Black, white, Asian, Native American, you name it.
Yeah.
And these are people who they were down a long time,
yes,
30 plus.
Yes, sir.
And I said to them, man, I sit in this room and I think to myself, if my neighbors, right, just people, your average Joes who are going to work and doing whatever, could sit in this room and be a part of this conversation and hear about your lives now, and then have the recognition that you were issued a life sentence at some point in time, they would be blown away because I am.
Yeah, definitely.
And I said to them, I'm so proud of them because they did it, and it's amazing to hear them talk about that when that change came for them. And it's huge.
It's always been, and like I met with a lot of those individuals. I know a lot of them personally.
I bet you do.
And a lot of them, there was instrumental people in their lives who allowed them they believed in them, right? And it's just like being down on your luck and having someone believe in you I think that's the strongest bond it could ever be, right? When nobody else is talking to you or writing you or phone talk, and somebody says, you know what, you can do it. I know you can do it. That's what uplifts an individual. What I'd like to talk about is the budget, and what do you think, what's the highlights of it? What were you impressed by when you looked at it?
Well, I mean, the governor said, and the lieutenant governor said to us, we want you to think, because we have this historic kind of surplus, we want you to think about what would be transformational. And when we did that, we went to our staff all across the DOC. We even went to people in the population. What's needed? What would make a difference? And we didn't invest in a bunch of hard security stuff. Big investments in lots of programming, education, pathways to employment, housing,
yes,
family support and connections. Reducing or eliminating the cost of phone calls.
Yes.
I mean, it was really grounded in the things that are about trying to lift people up in that system And it wasn't about, kind of hard, more security-based stuff.
Okay.
And, there's an element of agency our size that, just base stuff is big, right? You have step increases for staff, and you have those sorts of things, those costs that are just going to happen. And, we're a big kind of hit on the state's general fund. We don't have revenues, we don't. So it really becomes this scenario where these dollars are really, we wanted to make sure where we're investing in, one, what holds us accountable. Mm-hmm. So there are things like evidence-based practices. We want to make sure that exactly what you're talking about, those people that were instrumental.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
That created that connection, that believed in people.
Yeah.
That's evidence-based practice. They call it, the term for it is motivational interview, right? It's what are the things that you lift up on somebody where you connect with what's important to them, and believing in that. By just doing that and seeing that element of that person, now other areas can begin to be lifted up.
Definitely.
And that's really, so that's just, we have dollars invested in how do we make sure that stuff is happening. I mean, truly make sure, evaluate the interactions between staff and the people that they're working with. And so that's in there. That's an accountability mechanism. But other than that, it's a lot of dollars in, housing is just such an instrumental and core issue. Okay. So I thought I was amazed,
yes.
When we submitted it. And then when the governor and lieutenant governor sat down with us and said, here it is, we were like, wow. And then, they said, now your job is to go out and sell this to the legislators and to the community. And, we knew that it's going to be give and take and those sorts of things, but it's remarkable. And yet, one of the things that somebody asked, what did this do by way of system expansion, right? Because should we be building a bigger system?
Right.
And I understand that when you look and say, well, they're gonna invest another $115 million a year in corrections. Why would they invest that kind of money in this? That system, it's building a bigger system. And my challenge to that is it's building a different system. And I think, if we're going to be able to deliver the goods, and I'm not talking just about a substance use disorder treatment programming. I'm talking about the interactions that ultimately help people see themselves different, have an identity of saying, look, this is what happens to lifers, right? All of a sudden, at some point in time, they may come in young or whatever.
Yeah.
And you talked about your own experience of coming in a little bit, you were a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. And so you had an identity before, and you wanted to, you wanted to use whatever that time to do what was going to be beneficial. And that's what happens oftentimes is I look at these lifers through that lens, and they say, there was a point in time at which I just was like, man, I can see myself as somebody wholly different, and when I saw that, others saw that, and frequently, and I say this when I go talk to graduations of different programs. When I think about my own path, I would not be here were it not for the investments that people have made in me along the way. Yeah. They saw things in me and held that out to me that I couldn't see in myself. Right. Definitely. And sometimes they were tough in terms of saying, look, you're not living up to what your potential is. Mm-hmm. But there was enough of a relationship that I could hear that.
Right. And I think in the communities, because a prison is a community, and what you find with the lifers is they almost become the elders of the community.
100%.
And once they become elders of the community, they have this sense of responsibility. And once they get this sense of responsibility, then they have accountability to the community. And that needs to be transferred out, because these individuals, once they're given that opportunity to show and prove that they are those individuals that can be responsible, accountable, they do it. And then they come out and transfer it over. I know several lifers that I deal with that have
back on record. We're getting ready to go to break. Great, rich, full discussions. I love talking to you. I might have to call you up late at night. We can just chop it up, you know, because just the mindset that somebody just. But you're familiar with Mayan Burroughs, his situation. My concept, because I told you I spent a lot of time in the law library, and I heard a lot of guys say, I'm innocent. What I want you to think about before we come back to break is if you had walked past his cell and he told you that he was innocent, and he said, I have the paperwork to prove that I'm innocent, and he gave it to you, what would you do? Now we're going to break. I'm going to give you time to think about that. We'll be right back. Thank you again for being here today. Was the fact that I could never tell my story. I never had control of my narrative. And everybody said things about me that was not correct, that I thought should be incorrect, but I had no ways to get into the media to explain it to them. So what I've done is when I was leaving out of Fairboat, I got into assault with the CO. And I went to Oak Park Heights, served 8 months straight in Oak Park Heights. And when I was getting out, they were going to charge me on the streets. And I was like, how is this even possible? I was just in Supermax, served all my time, and now you want to charge me to make me go back to prison when and then the prosecutor and the defense attorney was trying to make it seem like just take the offense. I was like, I'm not taking this. So I ended up fighting and I ended up winning. But as I fought it, even when I was out, there was no place where I could go and tell my story. Like nobody was like, there was in media, was enough where I can say, this is what's going on. And I don't think that's just right. You know, like I spent 8 months and I signed on a deal there. Now they're trying to double charge me. It doesn't make any sense. I did it because I wanted to leave on my out date. So me and this man's we've been together for over 30 years. He did time first and then I did time after him. And as we came out, we wanted to do something positive. Like we didn't want to go back to do what we were doing before. Mm-hmm. And the end game was for us to, my whole thing's always been abolition. I wanted to not reform prisons. I wanted to remove prisons from society. I figured I can do that by talking to somebody like myself, one person. If I could reach one person, reach two people, just telling my story and seeing that I can go from being a person who destroyed my community to be some person who can improve my community. So I'm one of those guys you took the mirror, looked at myself, too old for this foolishness. I see what the youth are doing. That's why I had such a good conversation with John Choi, because you know we got to get to the youth, we got to start talking to them, and we have to show positive architects within our community, success stories of people who've done time, who out are doing positive things, and they're pulling individuals back up. Like, hey, you might have failed, but as long as we can keep him out of corrections, he can be successful. So that's sort of like our story, you know, with it. So the end game is just for me, without any monetary connection, just for me to save someone that's like myself who wasn't listening to anybody because there was nobody out there telling them there's something different that you can do.
So I have to ask. It's like, so why a podcast?
I wanted to do a documentary, but when I came out, my son was like, "You're too all over, sporadic. You need to do something like a podcast. I didn't know what a podcast was.
Right.
When I got out, and I started looking around, and I seen the influence that social media had over individuals. I said, it says social media is such a flip. Like it's there's nobody really talking about educational things, or really that's not popular. So I was like, it'd be great for us to be able to do a podcast based on criminal justice that people thought that was popular. They're listening to what's going on. Maybe they're picking up something from it, and it gives me the opportunity not to be in one lane. I can interview anybody. I can interview you today. Tomorrow I'll be interviewing that lady that spoke, that was a correctional officer on Saturday.
Yep.
She's coming in to tell her story. I talked to her, and then I'm gonna have Malika from Legal Aid. She's gonna be here. I'll talk to somebody in public safety. So this gives me such a wide variety of people I can talk to without being one-minded. You know, like I'm talking to everybody, trying to figure out the situation at the table, giving us all opportunity sort of to come in and give your input. Everybody's input's valuable.
So I have to ask this because I think it's.
I'm getting interviewed by
no, but because this is that whole thing about learning, right? I mean, and this is really, I think, elemental to the whole system. Is, you know, you do this and you have these conversations, and certainly there's different narratives, right? And yet you take it all in, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting because you aren't kind of one dimensional. You're recognizing the complexity
of everything, almost from your standpoint, because I'm dealing with policy, I'm dealing with criminal justice from the standpoint of DA, person being convicted, I did an interview with the lady whose son was shot at a nightclub in Uptown, and she wanted justice for her son. And probably the same week that I was talking about the police, we need to change, or we need more community policing. So it just gives me the opportunity to have everybody weigh in. And like I said, I'm not trying to keep anybody's comment. We call ourselves the voice of the voiceless. That was the motto I wanted to use, because I just believe that, again, we need to take back our narrative. And on top of us taking back our narrative, we need to also have a voice. I think that your voice is more popular than a rapper's voice that people who sold 1 billion records, because you yourself have the potential to change people's lives. You have that potential. You know what I'm saying?
But you do too. And you're doing it, right? In this way. I mean, I just am intrigued by the fact that you have these experiences, right?
Yes,
and then the turn for you ends up being a podcast, which I think is just it's crazy interesting.
Well, the thing about it too, I got to add some contextual spots to it. I was in MPWW with Jen, and that was really MPWW. What people don't talk about is, I'm gonna let it out the cat out the bag. Writing freed me. It freed me when I was locked up, but it also gave me positive role models. Jen, and all of them coming in, Mike coming in,
wow,
and not being correctional officers, but actually seeing that I had a gift of writing, and then being able to enter contests like Easy, Ezekiel Calajuri, Chris Cabrera, having people like that as my mentors, and looking up to them made me want to do better. Right, wanted me because we had a community. We call ourselves the Stillwaters Writers Collective, and the collective in itself was a community, and we were actually utilizing each other to check each other, because we didn't want the program to go away. So we did everything we possibly can to show people that we were more than just a felon, an offender.
Right.
So that's what saved me.
So this because that's exactly what the lifers talk about, right? Because the lifers talk about the fact that they create community. They have a connection. They share something, and they hold each other
Accountable,
both support and accountability at high levels. Sometimes.
Yeah, super high. Where, like I know David Islam. He's out now. He understands that they're looking at him. I helped, because he was my brother when I was in. I helped him when he came out, and just everything. He's he's really cognizant of the fact that his parole it's gonna maybe allow more people come out based on his behavior. That's very important.
No, and I think it's cool. I mean, this has been one of the areas, if there's an area that as a commissioner, I make those parole decisions on life sentence folks. And man, it's like, and I feel like you get to know them like pretty well. And there's a connection, and they know that, like, I'm invested in them.
Yes.
And frankly, they get invested in me, in helping me. And that's what the conversation was Friday, about saying, look, and they were talking about the stuff we do. Like, hey, look, can we help with, maybe we're not going to get them all, but could we go in and talk to some of these young guys who are coming in and they're just kind of, they don't have a path, or they're not looking at themselves. They're not seeing that, what they put out comes back to them in many respects. And we can deliver that message in ways that you can't. They're 100% correct.
Right.
And I just, it's crazy interesting. And I think these are the positive stories, right?
Yes.
Yours, the story of this podcast.
But you coming back to us and sitting down talking with us actually connects the circle, right? For me to be on the opposite side, do my time, come back, and now I'm speaking with the Commissioner of Corrections, and we're elevating thought, is spectacular. I mean, that's the conversation.
Cool. That's really cool.
That's the conversation, right? We have to, again, it goes right back to the motto. It's like, I could be your neighbor.
100%.
You want me to definitely come back with feeling like, hey, he's my neighbor.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, we're all good. He's cool. And that's all, that's like I say, that's all we've been trying to do. And I've been really happy because it's allowed me to give people a voice who, like I said, when I sat in that cell or when I came out, I felt like there was no place for me to go. We're giving them the voice. Like I said, even with you guys, I mean, a lot of people don't know the work that you're doing. I didn't know until I started really looking into the things that you've been part of. The same with John, the same with a lot of individuals, Jonathan McCullen. I didn't know, but now it gives me the ability to feel like, all these guys have their lanes. Let me grab my lane and maybe we can do something with this.
That's super cool.
Stop it for a second. Welcome back, SAF Mo, IGSTS, SAF Mo. I'm the smoothest podcast host in the history of podcasts. If you don't know, get up off the couch, ask your mom about it. But I'm in a grill pit. That's the studio with Paul Schnell. Y'all didn't think we was gonna get him, but we got him.
We're here.
He's here in the house. He's been trying to grill me up, y'all. I started to sit down in a white chair, have him interview me. But yeah, it was just building knowledge. I mean, like I was saying before, it's just such a great. This is something that I never thought, as I said in my cell, I never thought it was going to even be possible. But I mean, with just us, just moving universes, making things happen. Now it's possible. Now I asked you a question before we went off camera about if you came across someone who said they were innocent, being that you are the highest individual other than the governor in this system. What would you think you would have done if someone said that they were innocent?
Well, I mean, today we have some options, right? There are innocence projects that I refer people to, because I do get those letters.
Okay.
Or have people say that to me, or now the Attorney General's office did a conviction review unit.
Yes.
And so I refer people into that. It's a strange thing because I'm outside of the court process, right? I don't have individual kind of authority in that space, which is crazy. But I think it is one of the realities of our system, and I think one of the challenges in our system, that the appellate process is really brutal.
It's almost a rubber stamping of everything. But I thought the Commissioner of Corrections could execute or let someone go.
No, there's a very limited, conditional medical release, and that's for somebody who has grave injury off illness. Like we've had people who have had cancer and they wanted to go home to live out their final days, and I have that authority, but I don't have the authority to release anybody outside of kind of the framing of their sentence.
Now, let me ask you a question, because I'm glad you brought up medical, because medical is a segue that I want to get into. I think it's overlooked because prisons are so uniform, right? Everybody has to come in with, you're able to utilize their arms, their legs, their eyes, their ears. But we know there's a lot of individuals who are coming in now who have ailments, whether it might be the loss of vision, the loss of hearing, and it doesn't seem like the disability issues are being covered with those individuals, right? That like their standards. Like if I come in needing a wheelchair, I know I can go to Faribault and be part of that hospital unit.
Yep.
They sort of have that, but it doesn't seem like it's uniform throughout corrections. Like if I was blind, am I going to get the care that I need, other than maybe going to Oak Park Heights? So I'm just asking you now to.
Yeah, I think you're right, but this is why that person-centered approach stuff becomes so important, right? It can't be one size fits all, because obviously people have different abilities, and so based on that, we need to make sure that we're being responsive to that, and we haven't always been, and that's reflected in lawsuits and things that we've had to address, and we need to fix them. And so, I think you're right. And the reality is sometimes I look at some of the people that are coming in who have this range of challenges, and I think to myself, why did they send them to prison?
Just what when I was in Stillwater, I seen someone who was blind in prison, and it just made me grounded again. Like there was just, he had some things, like they had some books in Braille,
yeah.
And then he could make it back and forth. I seen people who were paraplegic, in county jail, and it's like, to me, I can't figure that out, and why it's so important to make these people go in when it costs as much or more for their medication, for facilitating their medical needs,
yes,
than it would be for them to be at home. And that has never made any sense to me. The next thing I sort of wanted to talk about, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, is that HRU deal.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I know you guys got rid of technical violations. I sat in last night at Energy Park. He's everywhere, man. He's moving around. I don't know where you're going to be later on, but last night, Energy Park here in St. Paul, right off of Summit, conversating with us in the grill pit. But HRU, so I got violated for a tech. They hit me with a text, sent me back, said I was unaccountable because of some situations was happening as far as having a ride. I'm not going to get into it, but I've been in situations where that HRU court, I was told going to the HRU court by the appellate attorney that was supposed to be handling my case, that pretty much what the PO says goes, and pretty much if he wants you to go back, you're going to go back. If he wants you to restructure you, restructure you. And I'm like, why are we even having a hearing? Why don't we just decide on what he's going to do and just send me back, because that's what I'm here for. So I don't know, has anybody told you about that, or has it been?
Yeah, this has been one of the areas that we have given focus to. So right now you're seeing there's been a reduction in the number of returns,
definitely,
right? Revocations.
Yeah.
Restructuring, because things happen, right?
Yeah.
Somebody relapses, somebody has transportation issues or housing instability, whatever it may be, and we restructure. The objective should be to help manage through that with that, as opposed to send people back for 90 days. It doesn't do any good, and in fact, the research says
it does worse. It killed me. It killed me going back.
Yep.
I was only out for 70 some days, but at the time, I'm a vet. So they were giving me housing. I had a key. Everything was set up. And it was just because of just this POs didn't want to have me on the caseload, sending me back. I heard other situations where they were because you're. I'm gonna explain this to you, because I was in a process as the first 30 days that I was out, every day I wanted to go back to prison. And it's deplorable for me to say something like that, but that's just how I felt. I felt it because when I was going through my situation, I had nobody helping me. I had my PO was there to send me back 24/7. Nothing, no resources. You know, if they were referring me to a resource, the resource was a slumlord. We know he's a slumlord. We know he's going to take your money. You have to deal with it because you're a felon. You know what I'm saying? Jobs. Go get that job. Go break your back. I mean, that's what a lot of lifers are saying because they're coming out at 50, 60 years old and they're going to work manual labor jobs because they don't have anything that transfers over. So that's why that reinvestment is such a great thing. But I felt I had to, and what happened? What changed me? What put SFMO in the position he's in right now?
The smoothest.
Said, listen, you know that's got to be qualified and certified because this man said it. I'm the smoothest, so you don't even have to ask your mama no more. So what changed my life was I just told myself, I came home after that 70, man, I almost want to cry. I came home after that those 70 days, and you know what I told myself? Like, I'm not going back to prison. I am not going back to prison. I don't care what it takes. I'm not going back. And when I told myself that, I got up and I started doing everything necessary for me not to go back and not catch a tech. It was beneficial that because they changed up the commit where the county of commits where you can go to any county. Because Anoka County kept wanting to put me on ISR, and Hennepin County had I was already set up for regular parole. So regular parole, that liberty actually gave me was actually beneficial to me. I flourished. I got my college degree. I became a CPRS agent. I'm a supervisor now for that. It's chemical dependency individuals. I graduated college, but I graduated college as cum laude, engineering. I just think that maybe there needs to be, if I had any suggestions, would be more transference over where the actual community or industry recognizes the fact that the criminal background should not. It should cut off at a certain particular time, and they should never take things into consideration that does not affect your ability to do your job. Because I have a lot of places that would deny me because of my criminal background, straight up, but it didn't enable me from doing my job. So that's just my little SAFMO segue.
Let me just say this, though, that I think right now, this is the time where we're trying to strike while the iron's hot because of, Minnesota is the lowest unemployment rate in the nation.
Yeah.
And so there's need for workers. And so we're having conversations with employers today that they never would have thought about.
Right.
That are paying $28, $29, $30 an hour in some of these kind of higher tech manufacturing places. They want good workers. And today it's more possible. But I think you're right. There has to be that level of support to help create those connections. That's what has to happen. I think being a social, having a social understanding, coming out with sociology being your degree, you can see that how necessary it is for individuals to have that connection to something, that need to be connected with something, have something to make you more than just a number, and education did that for me. Like you said, everybody has that. When you sit them down, everybody's like, hey, I want to get a certificate. I always want to cook. I love to cook. I want to use my hands. Faribault had always been, like, I went to Faribault and I got my mechatronics. But did you use mechatronics?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
I fought to get into that. I actually fought to get into that because when I came down, I was a tutor at Stillwater.
Okay.
And as soon as I came down, Faribault wanted to send me straight to the kitchen. I said, I've been doing education for the last 7 years. Yeah. Why are you trying to make me go to the kitchen? I have no aptitude, don't want to be in the kitchen. You have a college program. I'm really close to getting my associate degree. Why can't I just finish off with mechatronics? I fought. They had just switched over education directors. You never met Pat Pawblock, but she was education director during Tom Roy's commission.
Okay.
So she was really open. She was really nice. She was really somebody you could sit down and talk to. So when I got down to the Faribault, the education director was totally different. So like I said, I fought. They were threatening to send me to SEG. They would not. So this is my dealing with corrections, and this is the bottom looking up. I played with the people. I wrote kites. I told them I don't want to go to the kitchen. I want to go to education. I did everything possible to have them tell me, we don't care what you want. Go to the kitchen. And if you don't go to the kitchen, you can go to SEG.
Yeah.
And if you go to SEG, we're going to send you right back to Stillwater. So just have that. Like that to me is frustrating. So it's like a pot on the stove building up steam. I'm trying to do the best I possibly can. I want to have something when I get out, but I got to fight you just to get into the position to get that. Plus, have my disciplinary record clean, so I can get into your program.
Yep, and I think that's with a person-centered model. When you come in, and you look at what your interests are, your aptitude, those sorts of things, your strengths. We want to plan that like from the very beginning. What's the pathway? For some people, it might be, look, I need to get, I need to address my chemical dependency stuff, right? Because let's face it, even while you're inside, there's access, there's things you can do whatever.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is let's address that and let's create then that community of recovery for those folks that need it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then they could be in treatment during the day. They could be taking 2 college classes during the night.
Yeah.
They could. If somebody wants to be a full-time college student, be a full-time college student.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you want to pick up some extra work, you can work in the kitchen on Saturday and pick up just what happens in the community.
I'm not telling you I don't want to work. I just said I'm not coming out to be a kitchen worker. So can I do something that's my aptitude shows that I have the aptitude for? And so as we talk more about the reinvestment and you talk about them coming in on intake, my question is, are they doing aptitudes tests or are they telling you what they are? Are you using criminal what are you using?
So we're using, first and foremost, there's now a new kind of self-reported assessment.
Okay.
And it's really been interesting, and some people said, there's no way people won't be honest about it, and we found out that that's not true. People, they complete this, and it's ADA compliant, so people can get access to it. We can translate it for those people who need it. But it really focuses on the full picture, right? What were the traumas they had growing up?
Yes.
What are their interests? What's their educational background? It focuses on a lot of family stuff. What are the ways that they see how do they see themselves? What are the challenges that they identify? And then you talk to the education folks. You have your GED or your diploma. Mm-hmm. If you do, then let's start talking about, are there secondary things or certificates or AA, BA programs that you want to be involved in? And now the Pell money, the federal Pell grant stuff is reinstated so that folks inside can access Pell.
Yes,
it's a game changer.
It changed, yeah, because that was the main thing I was going through when I was in Stillwater. They had courses reduced, but even that was a lot of them get into age requirements. But yeah, I mean, I got my AA. I was almost done by the time I hit Faribault. It was great because it kept me active, kept me motivated, kept me wanting to stay out of trouble. That was super important. So I don't they didn't have the Pell Grant back in the day is what I'm getting at. So you had and the courses were like maybe $30. I forget what they were, but I took every course I possibly could take, and it really helped me out a lot.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I sort of wanted to talk about. So I was reading the budget, and at the first part of the budget, you have a mission statement. The mission statement was by successfully addressing the needs of the people served, the DOC provides the opportunity for redemption, productive community integration. It is the goal of these services for advancement of public safety. And I looked at those words and the mission, and I understand just like you that there's goals to be met, and there's a right now it doesn't meet those standards, but you're putting in there's a really big gap. Do you ever take your job home with you at night? Like last night you left me when I was with you. and you heard all those stories, and some of them were really, touching, like lady talking about, how she was fortunate enough to now she owns companies, nonprofits and things like that, sending people back to Africa. Do you take any of that home with you where you just can't, like, man, this is really bothering me. I need to really think about doing something about this? Or can you take it off, put it on?
So you asked that question, and it's weird because if you wouldn't have asked this, I would have never. I'll tell you that last night was not a very productive sleep night, because I kept playing over and over. Both those stories, the challenges that we face. Look, the last thing I want to do is disappoint people, and yet I know that this is a system that gap is real. Yes. Right? The gap between what we want to be, what we say we want to be, and where we are.
Yes.
There's a gap. And, I just have to be honest about that. And I wish I could just snap a finger and make that happen.
Right.
But in the meantime, I feel a level of accountability to those folks. It's crazy because that woman you talked about, she said before she left, she was can I take a picture with you for my Facebook page? Right? And it's like so weird for me, right? It's really, because of the system that you represent, and yet, and the imperfection of it, and yet, so I do take it home, and I will say equally, I worry about the call that one of our staff gets hurt. I worry about the times that we're failing people. I worry, because this is one of those businesses where a shoe can drop at any moment. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Right now, the scariest thing in prison is to hear silence. To hear silence, something's going on. I'm just letting y'all know. So I want to get this to you. The reason I didn't ask you on the show because I wanted you on the show because I thought it was about popularity or anything like that. I asked you on the show because I really respect what you're attempting to do. You know what I'm saying? Your goal, your vision, and I really wanted you to come on and explain to the people what you intend on doing so more people will feel like me about what you're doing. And whether you decide this is your last deal or whatever,
I'm getting old. I'm getting old. I'll tell you, I thought when I started it was going to be a 4-year deal, right? Because I thought, I even said this to the governor, I'm here, I'm all in 4 years. And then, we saw what happened in the election, and I thought, man, there's some now, like this Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act, man, this could happen.
Definitely.
And it was all of a sudden
restoration of rights.
Exactly.
Pass.
Voter right. Such a huge thing. Oh my God, it's cool.
Yeah, and you got so many. I call them alumni. You got so many people who've come out who've picked up the axe and picked up the mallet and it's carrying it. So it's not so you got Kevin Reese come out. You have Darius Bay come out. You had Easy come out. Ezekiel Kajzeri. You had Money Ross come out. You had D Nice come out. A lot of these I'm using their names. You had my man Lavelle come out. You have all these positive individuals who are inside the community who are uplifting a lot of these nonprofits that understand what we need. And it's like it's not just the government or legislature. It's not just anybody. It seems like everybody is trying to move to something that makes sense right about now.
It was crazy to testify in the Senate when the voting rights stuff. Right?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah,
and just the mix of people, right?
Yeah.
I testify, and then Willie Lloyd is out testifying, and just giving powerful testimony. It was just, and then to see it pass, just
that was to see people celebrating that. I'm not trying to hodgepodge back, but it brought me up to a question that made sense to me, and I've always had this question. I've always asked everyone that I've spoken to who's in positions of power. Because I question myself. So my deal I was under the impression that the punishment was the sentence. Got to prison, the punishment was prison. Came out of prison, but the punishment is the felony. Not to be able to have houses and have rights and things like that. Punishment was a conviction. And I can't figure out where the punishment is because it seems like it's almost a scarlet letter.
It never ends.
It never ends. But when I was watching the European model, they were like, the punishment is to conviction. Here, we're trying to bring people back to integrate back into society. Right. And I looked at your stats when I was looking at the, I think the budget. 95% of the people are leaving, and they're not going to come. Well, not 95%, but 95% don't reoffend. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, when we look at Minnesota, does pretty well. So 95% of the people that are inside are going to come out.
Yeah.
They're going to come out into the community. That's why everybody needs to have a vested interest in their success,
right?
Because they're going to be our neighbors. Right?
They're going to definitely be
the reality. Number one. Number two. Our the recidivism rate stuff. We are better than lots of places. We still 7 out of 10 people are going to do fine.
Yeah,
they're going to have their involvement with the system, and it's over.
Yes.
About those 3 they're the ones that are going to struggle a little bit more. And really, what should happen is the way the prison model works, and this is kind of crazy, and you know this because you lived it. The higher the security level of a prison, oftentimes the less program services there are.
True.
In fact, when you think about this, if you apply the notion of this, what they call the risk principle, that the people who have higher risk and higher needs, the two are simultaneous, run together, they should have the highest intensity of services.
Correct. Yes, definitely.
And yet our system is the very opposite. And I'm not saying we shouldn't give services and opportunities to people who are lower risk and lower need, but really, that's if you would have been supported when you talked about that time, right? When I just feel like I want to go back to prison, right? Yeah. We know that the first 25 days after release are if you could have an intensity of support during that 25 days,
definitely.
The risk of reoffense or return on a violation drops
considerably,
massively. And so we're starting to think about things like, you talked about like the recovery coach stuff and those types of models. What if there was a pure reentry program where modeled the same thing? Yes. That 25 days or more, but based on needs, what people needs and that kind of stuff, they're with you, and it's warm. They every day they're walking with you.
Lived experience, 100%. Talking to you.
No resources.
I'll challenge you on that because I was with Monty Ross a few months ago, and what he told me, he was like, we've done so much because remember these are lifers on served 30 years. Right. It's like, why don't the DLC employ us? And I could also see that being a role as individuals come out eventually, as they a few years out. Clearing off their paroles, coming back and serving the community, their community, making sure nobody else goes back. What do you think about that?
I'm there. I mean, here's the thing. We have hired somebody who is working in the restorative justice and victim services unit, who actually is still on supervision.
Ooh, that's strong.
And it was not something that's typical, because of the circumstances. I sign off on those but it's hypocritical for me to go out and have conversations with the Chamber of Commerce in some community and talk about the importance of second chance hiring and what talent that is available and sitting in these prisons, that if they had that connection with that employer who's willing to invest a little bit in them and give them a chance, it would make a difference. How can I say that to them and not do it myself?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's just proof in the pudding. That's what I feel like more people need to take that into consideration because, there's a lot of trades that are in prison that people don't know how to do anything. I mean, people don't even know how to use a hammer. I know. Because they're not being taught that because there's other things going on and there's no need for it. People don't know how to change oil or fix a car or stuff like. So there's so many things that could be done.
I have to write a check for all that stuff. Right?
I'm just saying. So I grew up, with 86 Thunderbirds and things like that. So I figured out how to do it. Of course, it's not doable anymore if you got anything newer. But it's just still like even using a hammer or understanding the difference between a Phillips screwdriver and a regular screwdriver is just things that people don't have aptitudes. But a lot of that stuff's still in prison. a lot of those guys could come back and, you know, and do a lot with it.
And they're making good money.
And making really good money.
Exactly.
I made really good money, but that mechatronics certificate really helped me because it boosted me to my engineering degree.
Yeah.
But I had the applicable skills. I got hired by Waste Management, and I was their mechanic, making crazy money, crazy hours, a lot of responsibility. But it wasn't just the program being there, but me advocating for my being placement in that program.
Yep.
You know, and that built. I mean, and it's just, and I think if I can give you anything, the thing that I thought the most, I had to believe in myself at some particular time, and that belief in myself propelled my future. So I saw myself not just being a prisoner or offender. I saw myself being a father, husband, you know, somebody pivotal in my community. What does that look like? Look like me gaining enough skills so when I come back and not being a menace to society, but being an instrument in society, being able to help my community.
You just described corrections 101, right? When does change happen? When the people have an identity.
Yes.
Dad, community member,
Yes.
neighbor.
Yes.
You know, making it, right?
Yes.
That's identity change, right?
Yes.
That was a perfect description of what we want, what should happen when people are with us. It can't be you walk out of there worse off, and you know,
just
the whole notion
want to come back. I mean, you're so broken down that you feel like prison. And I felt that, and I'm an educated individual. I'm not by far. It just, to me, it just made prison seem so much simpler because I knew what is expected of me, and I knew what my role was. And not to say anything. It took that maturity level for me to come up. And
but I also think, you know, just as you described this podcast in terms of that goal, and the fact that you're talking to everybody.
Yes, sir.
It's that complexity, right?
Yeah.
You could you got to a point where you could understand. We all, and I think we all do this. And you know, how do I fit in this? And how do I see myself? Where am I strong? And you built on that, and that's, I think, part of the success. And yet, our prison systems and correction systems don't focus oftentimes on the strengths. They focus on all the deficits.
Yeah, definitely. So we covered a lot of ground. I I definitely. What's the agenda look like for you now? What do you other than this reinvestment? You want to talk a little bit about that for just a second?
I mean, that's right now my dream, and I mean, because I think it's not just about the program; it's about the culture change. Mm-hmm. It says that we want to be about rehabilitation, and rehabilitation is about opportunity.
Yes, it is.
And so that's what we want to build. And the whole notion of the four components of MRRA, Minnesota Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act, is first this kind of notion of robust kind of self-assessment, person-centered approach,
yes,
multidisciplinary team, developing a personalized, individualized plan.
Yeah.
So Maurice's and Paul's plans are different.
Yes.
Because we're different people.
Yes.
And have different needs. And then that plan becomes the journey, and we can shift it and change. You know, like, do I need substance use disorder treatment right away before I enter mechatronics, or the school program, or the vocational program, or and we plan these things out based upon need. Then if you follow your plan, as opposed to 2/3 of your sentence being in prison, we drop that down to 50%. So you save that time, that little gap difference.
That's
and
good.
it can be a lot.
Yes.
So like 100 months difference.
That's a
17-month reduction.
That's a game changer.
And then you go out into supervision, and then every 2 months you do well. 1 month gets put into
That's a game changer. That's a game changer.
And then we take that savings. The savings goes into 4 pots. 25% goes back to victim services. We want to lift up healing.
Yes,
It's
definitely.
got to be about healing.
Yes, definitely.
For both the people that are in and the people that are out. Second, we want to make sure that where there are gaps in services in the community, and even if that's paying community programs to help provide supports and services to people, We have dollars invested in that. Third bucket is primary prevention. Let's see if we can do things to help keep people from entering the system.
Yeah,
altogether.
that's an innovation in itself, because to me it always seemed like the system wanted to not correct itself, and like the fact that it was, because what industry you look at is just this backwards that's still functioning. Nothing.
Right.
I got one question for you, and then so with all this being said, there's two beasts that I see that's going to be tough. First off, technology. That's going to be tough because none of the prisons are set up or they have the capacity. It's always a security level where they want to bring computers into cells, access to the internet into cells, and that could alleviate the second problem, which would be correction officers being available, because you're going to run into a shortage of individuals because you got all this programming. Right now it's tough to fill it. So how do you fill it? You maybe fill it with a computer in a cell so an individual could work even if he's locked down or she's locked down. So my question then is, how does technology look under your reign and then for the future?
Well, I think we're changing a lot. I mean, I wish it was done, but we had a massive investment in wireless technology for all the prisons, and we still have work to do. But millions of dollars have been invested in this to build out, networks, so that that you can, if you're in an education program, you can access those educational tools and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So that's happening. And I think within the next year or so, you're going to see that technology advancements really be pronounced, even in the prison setting, which I think is going to be really important for people.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think as we look at that, you talk to the senior people who are working in prison security staff, and you ask them what makes a place safer. People doing stuff.
Exactly. But doing the right stuff too. I mean, it's not, because you could sit around a poker table all day. Yeah. I know my guys out there playing poker. You can sit around a poker, but who wants to sit around a poker table when you can actually get an education? No, if a person wants to sit around a poker table, then fine. But I never sat around a poker table because I was too busy learning the law or going to school, getting my education, because I knew what was out. I knew there was something out for me when I walked out the door, and I wanted to be ready for it. Any shouts out? Any shouts out? Any people you want to say hello to out there?
I just want to say to everybody who is out there doing it, living it. I'm proud of you, and make sure you tell your story, because one of the things that we see, it's too commonplace. The stories of human failures are the ones that are easiest to tell. Mm-hmm. And there's so many people out there who are living life in very different ways that have been in the system, and because of their own strength or the supports they receive from family or friends or others. Tell your story, believe in yourself, because I believe that we're all better off when you do better. So that's my message. That's my shout out. And I thank you for your investments in yourself, and those investments pay a dividend for all of us. So thank you.
SFMO, your prison lawyer, the smoothest podcast in history. Hey, you don't believe me? Tell your girl to unblock you. She'll tell you. Had the phenomenal pulse. No, he did not disappoint me at all. In fact, I'm going to ask him back. I got some other stuff I want to talk to him about, but that's in the future. Keep your heads up. I'm going to smoke. SAFMO, prison lawyer. Thank you.
You're Ron. What do you got to say about SAFMO saying white MFers?
I don't give a fuck what anybody says, because it's America, and you should be able to do and say what the fuck you want. God bless America.
Thank you.